The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals just dropped an absolute bombshell order that could fundamentally dismantle one of the federal government's most widely used gun control statutes and potentially dozens of other federal laws along with this ruling. We just got the official en banc order in the case United States v. Squire, and the Fifth Circuit has officially vacated its prior panel decision to rehear this case en banc. But in this case, it's not just a Second Amendment Bruin challenge that is driving this case. Instead, the full Fifth Circuit is taking this case to answer a direct challenge to Congress's authority under the Commerce Clause. Now, you may be thinking, why now suddenly is the Fifth Circuit revisiting this issue surrounding the Commerce Clause? Because as Judge Higginson explicitly points out in his dissenting opinion on this order, the Fifth Circuit is directly answering a call issued just weeks ago by Justice Clarence Thomas in the Supreme Court ruling in Hamani. Depending on how this case goes, this could be a landmark case with implications and impacts well beyond the Second Amendment. So let's break down what just happened, what Justice Thomas said, and why this case could completely upend federal criminal laws and other federal statutes going forward. Now, before we jump into this video, if you like this type of content and you want to make sure you get it going forward, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also turn on all notifications to ensure you never miss these videos when I release them. I also want to thank one of the main supporters of this channel, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to self-defense protection, in my opinion, AOR is in a league of their own. They're backed by an actual law firm, the Attorneys for Freedom, and they're always trying to expand upon their benefits to give you as much as possible as a member. And right now, if you sign up using my link down below and you use my exclusive code ARMSCHOLAR for a limited time until the end of this month, you can get $50 off of your individual sign-up fee or $25 off of the family sign-up fee. Now, to understand how massive this news is, we have to look at the statute at the center of this case, and that's 18 U.S.C. Section 922G1, the federal prohibition banning individuals with prior felony convictions from possessing firearms or ammunition. Now, for years, litigants have tried to strike down this federal possession law using the Second Amendment. But in this case, U.S. v. Squire, the defendant challenged his conviction by going after the federal government's power to pass the law in the first place under the Commerce Clause. In June of 2026, a three-judge panel ruled against Mr. Squire, adhering to decades of their prior precedent. But Squire filed a petition for a rehearing en banc, asking for the entire Fifth Circuit to once again step in. On July 20th, 2026, the Fifth Circuit granted that petition, officially vacating the lower court panel's decision. The entire active bench of the Fifth Circuit will now rehear the case and take a hard look at whether mere possession of a firearm, even one that previously crossed state lines, actually falls within Congress's powers to regulate interstate commerce. Now, why did the Fifth Circuit suddenly jump in on this issue, and why are they revisiting the Commerce Clause, especially surrounding, the possession of firearms? Well, the Fifth Circuit Judge Higginson highlighted in his dissent from this order, taking the case en banc, that this move directly follows Justice Clarence Thomas's recent concurrence in the case U.S. v. Hamani. In Hamani, Justice Thomas, writing alone in a concurrence, explicitly invited lower courts to re-examine the constitutionality of 922G under the Commerce Clause. Under historical Supreme Court precedent like U.S. v. Lopez, Congress has regulated three categories of commerce. First, the channels of interstate commerce. Second, the instrumentalities or persons and things in interstate commerce. And third, activities that substantially affect interstate commerce. Now, in Lopez, the Supreme Court struck down the original Gun-Free School Zones Act of Section 922Q because it had no jurisdictional requirement showing that the gun affected interstate commerce. In response, Congress slapped a jurisdictional hook onto Section 922G, meaning as long as a firearm or ammunition ever crossed state lines or was manufactured out of state, the feds claimed authority over it for essentially forever because of the Commerce Clause. Now, for 30 years, every federal circuit court has accepted that jurisdictional hook on, the language there, but Justice Thomas questioned whether an item simply having crossed a state line at some point in its, history essentially gives Congress the power to criminalize locally, purely intrastate possession today. Now, the Fifth Circuit heard Justice Thomas very loud and clear, and they're stepping in and they're going to step up to bat on this issue of the Commerce Clause and how it interplays with these 2A issues. Now, Judge Higginson, in his dissent from the order granting that rehearing, essentially shows how terrified the establishment and how some, judiciary and some judges really are when it comes to this topic in this case. He wrote in the dissent that just a few weeks ago, Justice Thomas asked lower courts to re-examine the constitutionality of 18 U.S.C. Section 922G under the Commerce Clause. Already, our court answers the call. We imperil much of the United States Code. Judge Higginson argues that if the Fifth Circuit holds that Section 922G1 lacks a sufficient connection to interstate commerce, it would not just affect gun laws. He points out that this could open the floodgates, calling into question federal statutes and countless other administrative and criminal regulations that rely on that same thin interstate nexus when it comes to the Commerce Clause. In fact, in his dissent, he raises this kind of apocalyptic question for federal prosecutors and, how this could impact things going forward. He, questions, can felons in other circuits move to Texas, Louisiana, or Mississippi to rearm themselves? Will thousands of existing Section 922G convictions in the Fifth Circuit, essentially have to be overturned? And these questions all come in because the federal government has built various restrictions and laws kind of on a house of cards, and that house of cards really has been the Commerce Clause. This judge and likely others are afraid that this house of cards will come falling down from a ruling from the Fifth Circuit, because all of this was built on the Commerce Clause and how it's applying in this federal law. Now, whether you agree with Judge Higginson's alarmism in his dissent, or you agree with the view that this is a long overdue correction back towards the Constitution's original limits on federal power, one thing is very clear with what the Fifth Circuit is doing. The Fifth Circuit is preparing to send shockwaves through the federal legal system. The court has ordered a full briefing schedule and oral arguments, and those will actually be scheduled very soon. If the Fifth Circuit actually rules that Section 922G exceeds Congress's Commerce Clause authority, it will create a very immediate, massive split with every other circuit court in the country, forcing the Supreme Court to take the case and face Justice Thomas's question head on and force this on the rest of the Supreme Court. So I will be tracking the supplemental briefs and the oral arguments in the briefs that are submitted going forward. Let me know down below in the comment section, what do you think about the simple possession of an item manufactured out of state? Do you think that counts as interstate commerce? And therefore, do you believe that Congress has its authority under the Commerce Clause? Or do you think that the Commerce Clause has been expanded way too far, is expanding to too many things, and now needs to be done away with? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. If you like this type of video and you want to make sure you get these videos going forward, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and turn on all notifications to never miss these videos when I release them. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.